A routine flight is about to become the stage for a life-altering confrontation when a flight attendant singles out a black man. Her power trip escalates from a sneer to a shocking act of destruction. She rips his ID to shreds right before his eyes. She thinks she's won. She thinks she's put him in his place. But what she doesn't know is that the man she just humiliated isn't just any passenger. He's a federal agent in the middle of the most dangerous case of his career, and she just blew it wide open. Stay with us as we unfold the story of how a single act of prejudice triggered a mid-air investigation that brought down a criminal empire, and how karma delivered a check that one woman could never hope to cash. The air in the terminal at JFK was thick with the usual symphony of chaos, the frantic roll of suitcase wheels, the distant garbled announcements of final boarding calls, and the low hum of 1,000 conversations. It was a symphony Special Agent Logan Barrett had heard countless times. He was a man who thrived in organized chaos, a student of human behavior who could pick out the tells of a liar in a crowded room or the subtle signs of a pickpocket working the line. But today, he wasn't looking for criminals. He was just a man trying to get home. Dressed in a simple, well-tailored charcoal suit, minus the tie, which was tucked in his carry-on, Logan projected an aura of quiet confidence. He stood a solid 6'2", with the lean, powerful build of someone who spent as much time in the bureau's gym as he did behind a desk. He was reading a file on his tablet, a last-minute review of a closed case, a habit he couldn't shake. He was flying from New York to Dallas on Atlantic Sky Airlines Flight 7115, a milk run he'd taken a dozen times before. It was meant to be a moment of decompression after a grueling 3-week operation that had dismantled a sophisticated financial fraud ring. All he wanted was to sink into a window seat, put on his noise-cancelling headphones, and let the drone of the engines carry him back to his life. The boarding process began, and Logan, holding a Zone 2 boarding pass, fell into line with the other passengers. He was patient, his eyes scanning the crowd, not with suspicion, but with a practiced, almost subconscious awareness. He noticed the young couple bickering in hushed tones, the businessman rehearsing a presentation under his breath, the child trying to sneak a contraband cookie past his mother. It was the tapestry of life, and Logan usually found it comforting. As he approached the gate agent, a woman with a severe blonde bob and a name tag that read Caroline, he saw her demeanor shift. Her smile, which had been plastered on for the preceding passengers, tightened and vanished. Her eyes, a pale, cold blue, flickered from his face down his expensive suit to his polished leather shoes and back up. It was a look he knew well. It was a look that appraised, judged, and dismissed him all in one sweep. It was the silent question, "How can you afford this boarding pass and ID?" she said, her voice flat, devoid of the cheerful lilt she'd used with the woman in front of him. Logan handed them over. He held a standard Texas driver's license. Name, Logan Barrett. Photo, a man with a neutral expression looking directly into the camera. Caroline Reed held the 2 documents, her crimson-nailed thumb rubbing over his photo, as if trying to smudge it away. She looked from the ID to his face. Then back to the ID. She did this 3 times, each pass slower than the last. The line behind Logan was growing a restless shuffle of feet and sighs. "Is there a problem?" Logan asked, his voice calm and even. He refused to give her the reaction she was clearly fishing for. "This doesn't look like you," she declared, her voice now loud enough for those nearby to hear. Heads started to turn. Logan felt a familiar hot prickle of anger at the base of his neck but his training kept it locked down. Show no emotion. Observe. "I assure you it is," he said. Caroline held the ID up to the fluorescent light of the terminal, squinting dramatically. "The photo quality is poor. The hologram looks off." She was creating a narrative, building a case for her suspicion in front of a captive audience. "It's a state-issued ID," Logan replied, his patience wearing thin. "It was valid enough for the TSA agent 30 feet from here. It should be valid enough for you." "TSA makes mistakes." She sniffed her lip, curling in a slight sneer. "We have our own security protocols to follow. Airline policy gives me the right to deny boarding if I have any doubts about a passenger's identity." The word doubts hung in the air, thick and polluted. It was a euphemism, a polite stand-in for the real word she wouldn't say. Logan knew he had two options he could escalate: demand a supervisor, and potentially miss his flight while this woman reveled in the power she held over him. Or he could try to de-escalate, to placate her. He chose a third option, the one he was trained for: control the encounter. "I have other forms of identification," he said, reaching for his wallet. "I have a credit card with the same name, a university alumni card." "I need to see government-issued photo ID," she snapped, cutting him off. "This is all you've provided, and frankly, I'm not convinced it's real." This was the precipice. Logan could see it in her eyes, a glint of twisted excitement. She was enjoying this. The power to humiliate him, to inconvenience him, was a thrill. The line behind him was now a small crowd of onlookers. He could feel their stares, some sympathetic, some annoyed, some sharing Caroline's suspicion. And then she did it. With a flick of her wrist, she brought the ID down to the counter. With her other hand, she held it in place. Then, with a deliberate theatrical motion, she tore it in half. Rip. The sound was shockingly loud in the sudden silence of the gate area. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Logan stared not at the two pieces of his ruined license lying on the counter, but at her face. Her expression was one of smug finality. There it said, "Problem solved." "This is clearly a fake," Caroline announced to the silent audience. "You will not be boarding this flight. I'm calling Port Authority." The hot prickle at Logan's neck exploded into a cold, controlled fury. His mind, usually a storm of analysis and observation, went perfectly, terrifyingly still. All the exhaustion from his last case, all the frustration of navigating a world that still saw his skin color before his character, all of it coalesced into a single point of focus. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't move a muscle for a long moment. He let her pronouncement hang in the air, let her savor her victory. Then he spoke, and his voice was so low, so devoid of emotion, it was more menacing than any shout. "You've made a mistake," he said softly. "My only mistake was not spotting you sooner," she retorted, reaching for the phone. "No," Logan said, his eyes locking onto hers. He slowly, deliberately reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket. The movement was smooth, practiced, and held a certain weight that made Caroline pause, her hand hovering over the phone. He didn't pull out another ID. He didn't pull out his wallet. He pulled out a small black leather bifold case. He flipped it open. Inside, nestled in a custom cutout, was a gleaming gold medallion. The eagle, the shield, the scales of justice. It was an icon of power and authority, recognized worldwide. He held it up for her to see. He didn't flash it. He presented it. "Special Agent Logan Barrett," he said, his voice a blade of ice. "Federal Bureau of Investigation. And you," he added, his gaze flicking down to the two pieces of his driver's license, "have just destroyed government property that is now evidence in a federal investigation against you for violating Title 18, Section 242 of the U.S. Code, Deprivation of Rights, under color of law." Caroline's face went through a rapid, fascinating series of transformations. The smug superiority drained away, replaced by disbelief. Disbelief gave way to confusion. And finally, as the weight of his words and the reality of the badge in front of her settled in confusion, curdled into pure, unadulterated panic. Her skin, already pale, turned a ghostly white. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The phone clattered from her hand onto the counter. Logan leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that was for her, and her alone. "This flight 715 is part of an active federal operation. Your little power trip didn't just inconvenience a passenger, Caroline. You just interfered with a federal agent in the performance of his duties. You have no idea the trouble you're in." He gestured with the badge toward the cockpit door. "Now I will be boarding this flight. You will go find the captain and inform him that an armed federal agent is on board and that he is to meet me on the flight deck before that door closes. Do you understand me?" She could only nod, her eyes wide with terror fixed on his badge, as if it were a venomous snake. The crowd, which had been buzzing with whispers, was now dead silent, watching the real-life drama unfold. The power dynamic had not just shifted, it had been annihilated. The woman who held all the power moments ago was now a crumbling wreck, and the man she had tried to break now held her entire future in the palm of his hand. Logan retrieved the two halves of his ID from the counter, placing them carefully into a small evidence bag he produced from his carry-on. He looked at her one last time. "Go," he commanded. Caroline Reed, her body trembling, turned and stumbled toward the jet bridge, a woman walking toward a reckoning she had personally and so arrogantly arranged. Logan, his face an unreadable mask of calm, stepped past the gate and onto the plane, the silent, stunned passengers parting for him like the sea. His trip home was officially over. His work had just begun. The sterile, recycled air of the aircraft cabin did little to cool the icy resolve solidifying in Logan's gut. As he walked down the aisle, the whispers followed him, a ripple of awe and speculation. He found his seat 7A, a window seat in the Economy Plus section. He stowed his carry-on, sat down, and fastened his seatbelt, his movements economical and precise. To any casual observer, he was just another passenger settling in. But inside his mind was a whirlwind of activity, recalibrating and adapting. His original plan, sleep music detachment, was gone. The incident at the gate had changed everything. Caroline Reed's actions were so far beyond the pale of poor customer service that they screamed of something more. It wasn't just prejudice. It was desperate. It was frantic. Why would an airline employee take such a massive career-ending risk over a driver's license? Tearing it up was an act of finality, an act designed to ensure he did not get on this plane. The question was, why? Was it just him? A black man in a suit she decided to make an example of. Or was it something else? Did she recognize him? Unlikely. His work in financial crimes kept him out of the public eye. Did she suspect he was law enforcement? Possible, but her actions were a surefire way to attract, not deflect, official attention. The logic was missing, and where logic was missing, Logan knew to look for a different kind of motivation. Fear. The flight deck door opened, and a man in a crisp white pilot's uniform with 4 stripes on the epaulets stepped out. He was older, with a weathered face and a calm, authoritative demeanor. This was Captain Miller. He scanned the cabin, his eyes eventually landing on Logan. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod and made his way down the aisle. He stopped at Logan's row. "Sir, I'm Captain Miller. My gate agent informed me of the situation." His tone was carefully neutral. "Agent Barrett," Logan replied, meeting the captain's gaze. "And the situation is that your employee may have committed a federal crime and has interfered with a government operation." Miller's composure didn't crack, but Logan saw a flicker of deep concern in his eyes. "The flight deck is secure, if you'd like to join me." "Thank you, Captain," Logan said. He unbuckled and followed Miller to the front of the plane. The other flight attendants watched him pass with a mixture of fear and curiosity. He noted their faces. 2 women, 1 man. All of them looked nervous. Inside the cockpit, the co-pilot, a younger man with sandy blonde hair, named David Jensen, according to his uniform tag, turned in his seat. He looked tense, his hands gripping the yoke tighter than necessary. "Close the door," Captain Miller said. Once it was sealed, he turned to Logan. "Agent Barrett, I cannot begin to apologize enough for what happened at the gate. Caroline's behavior was inexcusable and will be dealt with severely." "I appreciate that, Captain," Logan said, his tone all business. "But inexcusable doesn't cover it. I need to know if her behavior was part of a pattern. Has she had issues before?" Miller sighed, running a hand over his silver hair. "Caroline can be difficult. She has a few customer complaints on her record. Sharp tongue, a certain rigidity with the rules, but nothing like this. Nothing that would even hint at this level of aggression or, frankly, stupidity." "What you call stupidity, I call a red flag," Logan stated. "My presence on this flight is not a coincidence. I was returning from an operation in New York. There's a possibility, however remote, that my surveillance was compromised and that someone knew I would be on this flight." The co-pilot Jensen finally spoke, his voice a little tight. "But why would a flight attendant care? What would be the motive?" Logan turned his gaze on Jensen. The co-pilot's eyes darted away for a split second before meeting his again. A tell. A small one, but a tell nonetheless. "That's what I intend to find out. I need the full crew manifest. Names, employee numbers, home bases, and I need to speak with Ms. Reed." "Of course," Captain Miller said, already moving to print the information. "She's in the rear galley supposedly composing herself. I told her not to move." "Good," Logan said. He turned back to Jensen. "Co-pilot Jensen, how long have you flown with Caroline Reed?" "Dave, please," Jensen said, forcing a casual smile that didn't reach his eyes. On and off for a couple of years. We're both based out of Dallas. She's fine. Keeps to herself, mostly." He was being deliberately vague. Another tell. Logan's internal alarm bells were ringing louder. This wasn't just about Caroline anymore. He took the crew list from Captain Miller. Caroline Reed, David Jensen, and 2 other attendants, Sarah and Ben. "Captain, I need you to do 2 things for me," Logan said. "First, I need you to fly this plane as if nothing is wrong. Maintain course speed and standard communication. Second, under no circumstances are you to allow co-pilot Jensen to communicate with anyone on the ground via any non-official channels. No personal cell phone, no ACAR's messaging that isn't standard flight procedure. Do you understand?" Jensen's head snapped toward Logan. "Hey, what is this, Willie? Why are you targeting me?" Captain Miller looked from Logan to his co-pilot, his expression hardening. He was a man who understood chain of command. And in this sealed metal tube, a federal agent's directive was a command he would not question. "You heard him, Dave. Radio silence." Jensen's face flushed with anger and something else. Fear. The same fear Logan had seen in Caroline's eyes. The connection was there. He could feel it. "Agent Barrett," Miller said. "What do you suspect is happening on my plane?" "I suspect," Logan said, his eyes still locked on Jensen, "that my being on this flight was not a surprise. And I suspect that Caroline Reed's attempt to keep me off it wasn't an act of racism. It was an act of panic, and people only panic when they have something to lose." Leaving the captain to watch over his now fuming co-pilot, Logan exited the cockpit. The charade was over. This plane was now a crime scene, and he was the only cop on the beat. He made his way to the rear of the aircraft. The two other flight attendants, Sarah and Ben, were huddled together near the service carts, their conversation stopping the moment they saw him. They looked at him like he was a ghost. "I need to speak with Caroline," he said. "Alone." Ben, a young man who looked barely out of his 20s, nodded quickly and practically fled toward the front of the cabin. Sarah, a woman in her late 40s with kind eyes that were now filled with worry, hesitated. Is she going to be arrested?" she whispered. "That depends entirely on her," Logan replied. He found Caroline sitting on a jump seat in the rear galley, her head in her hands. Her severe blonde bob was disheveled, and her makeup was smudged where tears had streaked through it. She looked up as he approached, her eyes raw with terror. "Please," she whimpered. "I'll lose my job. I have a mortgage. I'm so sorry, I panicked." Logan closed the curtain to the galley, cocooning them in the small space. "We're past sorry, Caroline," he said, his voice low and steady. He wasn't here to intimidate her now. He was here to break her. Panicking is forgetting to arm a door. Panicking is spilling coffee on a passenger. What you did was a calculated act. You didn't just want to stop me. You wanted to humiliate me. You wanted to make sure I was detained. Now you're going to tell me why. It was a mistake. I was stressed. I misjudged," she stammered, reciting the excuses she had likely been rehearsing. "Let's talk about a different kind of stress," Logan countered, leaning against the counter. "Let's talk about the stress of being part of a criminal conspiracy. Let's talk about the stress of having an FBI agent unexpectedly show up on a flight that's crucial to your operation. Is that the kind of stress you were feeling?" Her face went slack. The blood drained from it, leaving her looking like a porcelain doll. I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I think you do," Logan pressed. "I was in New York for 3 weeks, Caroline. My team and I just took down a money laundering operation, a big one. We seized assets, froze accounts, made a dozen arrests. But the guy at the top, the architect, we missed him. He slipped through the net. We had intel that he might be trying to flee the country, but no solid leads on how." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Funny thing, though. We knew he had help on the inside of the travel industry, people who could move him or his money or his merchandise without setting off alarms. People like flight crew members." Caroline started to tremble violently, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She was breaking. "When you tore up my ID," Logan continued, his voice relentless, "you weren't just being racist. You were trying to protect something, or someone. Someone who is on this plane right now. Someone you were supposed to be helping. And when you saw my face, a face you were somehow warned about, you did the only thing your panicked mind could think of to stop me from getting on board and ruining your plan." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "So I'm going to ask you one more time, Caroline. Who are you protecting? Who else is on this crew is involved? Is it the co-pilot, David Jensen? The man who couldn't look me in the eye. The man who is currently under guard on the flight deck. The mention of Jensen's name was the final blow. A sob escaped Caroline's lips, a wretched guttural sound of utter defeat. The dam of her lies burst, and the truth came flooding out in a torrent of tears and confessions. "We were just supposed to be carrying a package," she cried, her words tumbling over each other. "Just a package. To a contact in Dallas. Dave got me into it. He said it was easy money, a few flights a month, no questions asked. We never knew what was in them. He just said it was better not to know." "Who is the package for? Who is the contact?" Logan demanded. "I don't know his name," she insisted. "He's a passenger, seat 21B. We were supposed to make sure he got off the plane with the bag, without any trouble." Dave got a text this morning. It was a picture of you. It just said, "Possible law enforcement. Be careful." When I saw you at the gate, I just freaked out. I thought if I could stop you from boarding, we could still go through with it. 21B. Logan's mind raced. He had the crew. Now he had the courier. He pulled out his phone, which had a secure satellite-based connection. He sent a single encrypted text to his team on the ground, Atlantic Sky 715. Suspect on board. Passenger in 21B. Crew members Caroline Reed and David Jensen are accomplices. Have task force meet us at DFW. Advise Dallas field office. Moving to secure package. He put the phone away and looked at the broken woman in front of him. Her life was over. Her career, her freedom, all of it gone. All because she chose to get involved in something she couldn't handle. And because when push came to shove, her first instinct was to lash out with prejudice and hate. "Stay here," he told her. "Don't speak to anyone." He pushed back the curtain and stepped into the main cabin. The atmosphere was still tense. He walked down the aisle, his eyes fixed on row 21. There in the middle seat was a man. He was nondescript in his 50s, with thinning hair and glasses. He was pretending to read a magazine, but his knuckles were white where he gripped it. He looked up as Logan approached, and his eyes widened in recognition and fear. Logan didn't need to see his ID. He recognized the face from the surveillance photos. This wasn't just a courier. This was him. This was the man who had slipped through their net, the architect of the whole operation. And in the overhead bin above seat 21, Logan knew was not just a package. It was the key to everything. The flight attendant's desperate, hateful act had inadvertently led him right to the man he had been hunting for weeks, the karma he thought was already beginning its descent. The realization hit Logan with the force of a physical blow. The man in 21B wasn't a mule. He was the kingpin, Alexander Croft, a ghost who ran a multi-million-dollar empire of fraud and illicit transfers, a man so good at erasing his digital and physical footprints that the Bureau had spent a year just trying to get a current photograph of him. And here he was trapped in a metal tube at 30,000 feet, all because a flight attendant let her bigotry override her criminal instincts. Logan had to play this perfectly. Croft didn't know that Logan knew who he was. He only knew, thanks to Caroline's panicked warning system, that there was a cop on the plane. The key was the package. Croft would be protecting it. His entire escape plan, and likely a significant amount of untraceable assets, would be in that bag. Logan couldn't just walk up and arrest him. Not yet. A confrontation in the middle of a packed cabin could get dangerous. Croft was cornered and cornered. Men do stupid things. He needed to control the environment first. He walked past row 21, without a flicker of recognition, continuing to the rear galley. He found the other two flight attendants, Sarah and Ben, nervously tidying an already immaculate service cart. He needed an ally. He looked at Sarah, the older of the two. Her eyes showed fear, but also a steely competence. "Sarah," he said quietly, pulling her aside, just out of earshot of Ben. "I need your help. This is now a matter of flight security." She swallowed hard. "What do you need?" "The man in seat 21B. He is a dangerous fugitive. He has a package in the overhead bin that is critical evidence. I need to secure it without him realizing what's happening. I need a distraction." Sarah's years of training kicked in her face, firming with resolve. "What kind of distraction?" "Turbulence," Logan said. "Not real, of course. I need you and Ben to prepare the cabin for unexpected turbulence. Make the announcement. Be convincing. Secure the galleys. Tell everyone to return to their seats and fasten their seat belts. It will create movement noise and confusion, and it will give me a reason to be near his row, checking the overhead bins." I can do that," she said, her voice gaining strength. "Captain Miller can make the call from the cockpit to sell it." "Exactly. Tell Ben what he needs to know. You have 1 minute to get ready." Sarah nodded, a professional assuming her role. She turned to Ben, her voice low and urgent. Logan watched them for a moment, then walked back toward the front of the plane, his pace unhurried. He passed 21B again. Croft was no longer pretending to read. He was watching Logan, his eyes narrow slits of calculation. A moment later, the captain's voice crackled over the PA system. "Folks, this is Captain Miller. We're about to hit an unexpected patch of rough air. We're asking all passengers to please return to your seats immediately and fasten your seatbelts. Flight attendants, please secure the cabin for turbulence." The effect was instantaneous. The low hum of the cabin erupted into activity. Passengers moved, buckles clicked, and the flight attendants, Sarah and Ben, moved down the aisles with practiced urgency, their voices calm but firm. "Sir, please fasten your seatbelt. Ma'am, let me get that for you." It was the perfect cover. Logan positioned himself a few rows ahead of Croft, pretending to help a passenger with her seatbelt. As Sarah and Ben worked their way down, creating the distraction, he saw his opening. He moved to row 21. The passenger on the aisle, a young student, was already buckled in his headphones on. Croft was in the middle, his body rigid, his eyes locked on Logan. "Excuse me, sir," Logan said, his voice polite but firm, addressing the student on the aisle. "Just need to check this overhead bin is secure." He reached up and opened the bin directly over Croft's seat. Inside were a few jackets and one simple black rollerboard suitcase. The package. It had to be. Croft's eyes darted up to the bin, a flash of panic in them. He started to make a move, a subtle shift, as if to stand up. "Sir, please remain seated and keep your seatbelt fastened," Logan said, his eyes meeting Croft's. The command was spoken with the full authority of the FBI, and Croft, for a split second, froze. That was all the time Logan needed. He grabbed the handle of the black suitcase. It was heavier than it looked. He didn't pull it out completely. He just shifted it, moving it behind another passenger's duffel bag. Then from his pocket, he pulled out a small high-tech device, a GPS tracker, with a powerful magnetic clamp. With a movement too quick for most to follow, he attached it to the inside frame of the suitcase, hidden from view. He then pushed the bag back into its original position and slammed the bin door shut, the click echoing with finality. "All secure," he announced to no one in particular. He gave Croft a tight, meaningless smile and moved on, continuing his check of the other bins. He had tagged the package. Now, even if Croft managed to get off the plane with it, they wouldn't lose him. The first phase of securing the situation was complete. But as he moved back towards the front, a new problem emerged. Co-pilot David Jensen, who was supposed to be under the captain's watch, was coming out of the cockpit. His face was pale, his movements jerky. He was holding a tablet. "Captain Miller needs the latest weather charts," Jensen said to Sarah, his voice strained. But he wasn't looking at Sarah. He was looking past her down the aisle, trying to catch Croft's eye. Logan intercepted him. "I thought the captain and I had an agreement, Dave." Jensen flinched at the use of his first name. "The captain sent me." "Go back to the flight deck. Now," Logan ordered. But it was too late. Jensen held up the tablet, angling it just so. On the screen wasn't a weather chart. It was a text message, the font enlarged. "He's a Fed. He's on to us. Abort." Croft saw it. Logan saw him see it. The fugitive's face hardened the mask of the nondescript passenger, falling away to reveal the cold, ruthless man underneath. The game was up. Croft knew. Jensen knew. And now they were all trapped in a pressure cooker. Jensen tried to push past Logan, but Logan grabbed his arm in a grip of steel. "You're under arrest," Logan hissed, keeping his voice low to avoid inciting a full-blown panic in the cabin. But Croft was already in motion. He wasn't going to wait for the plane to land. He unbuckled his seatbelt, pushed past the terrified student in the aisle seat, and lunged for the overhead bin. "He's going for the bag," Logan shouted, shoving Jensen into Ben's custody. "Stop him!" The cabin, which had been settling into the feigned turbulence, erupted into chaos. Passengers screamed as Croft, with surprising strength, ripped the bin door open. He grabbed the black suitcase, but a large passenger in the row behind him, a burly man in a football jersey, reacted on instinct, grabbing Croft's arm. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" the man yelled. Croft snarled and swung the heavy suitcase, using it as a weapon. He clubbed the man on the shoulder, sending him staggering back into his seat. Croft now had the bag and a clear path to the middle of the galley near the emergency exit door. The scenario Logan had dreaded was now happening. A violent, cornered fugitive, a potential weapon in his hand, and a plane full of innocent people. "Nobody move!" Croft bellowed, his voice raw with desperation. He held the suitcase in front of him like a shield. "I get off this plane when we land, or I'm opening this door." It was an empty threat. It's physically impossible to open a cabin door mid-flight due to pressurization, but the passengers didn't know that. Panic began to ripple through the rows. Logan drew his service weapon, a sleek Sig Sauer P29, keeping it low, and pointed at the floor. The sight of the gun silenced the screams, replacing them with horrified gasps. "Alexander Croft," Logan's voice boomed through the cabin, calm and authoritative. "It's over. You are surrounded. There is an FBI task force waiting for you on the ground. There is no escape." Croft laughed, a wild, unhinged sound. "There's always an escape." He glanced at the emergency door, then at the terrified faces of the passengers, and then at Logan. He was looking for leverage, for an advantage. His eyes landed on Caroline Reed, who had emerged from the rear galley, drawn by the commotion. Her face was a mask of pure terror. She was the one who had started all of this. In a split second, Croft dropped the suitcase and lunged for her. He grabbed her, pulling her in front of him as a human shield. He snaked an arm around her neck, cutting off her scream. "Drop the gun, Agent!" Croft screamed, his knuckles white against Caroline's throat. "Drop it, or the flight attendant who tried to help you gets it." The irony was sickening. The woman whose prejudice and criminal complicity had set this entire disaster in motion was now a shield for the very man she was trying to protect. Logan stood firm, his gun still held in a low, ready position. His mind was racing, assessing the angles, the risks. He saw Captain Miller emerge from the cockpit, his face grim. He saw the fear in every passenger's eyes. And he saw the utter karmic horror on Caroline Reed's face as she realized that her terrible choices had led her to this moment, a pawn in a deadly endgame she could never have imagined. The unraveling was complete. Now it was a matter of survival. The standoff was a vacuum sucking all the air and sound from the cabin and replacing it with a thick, suffocating dread. The plane, an instrument of speed and progress, felt like a leaden tomb suspended in the infinite blue. Alexander Croft, his face a grotesque mask of sweat and desperation, held Caroline pinned against the emergency exit door. His arm was a vice around her neck, and with every shallow, ragged breath he took, she could feel the pressure increase, a terrifying promise of annihilation. For Caroline, the world had devolved into a series of fractured sensory inputs, the rough fabric of Croft's jacket against her cheek, the sour smell of his fear, the cold, unyielding plastic of the door against her back. The passengers moments before individuals, with destinations and lives, had blurred into a single, terrifying entity, a gallery of wide, accusing eyes. Her own choices echoed in her mind, a frantic, screaming loop. Tearing the eyed, the smug satisfaction, the shock of the badge, the dawning horror in the galley. It was a chain of cause and effect, so direct, so brutal, that it defied belief. She had built this cage for herself, and now the man she had tried to protect was its monstrous jailer. Logan stood his ground, a pillar of calm in the swirling chaos. His Sig Sauer felt like a lead weight in his hand. He could see the tremble in Croft's arm, the frantic darting of his eyes. This was the most dangerous moment. Croft was no longer a calculating criminal. He was a cornered animal, operating on pure adrenalized instinct. "Let her go, Croft." Logan repeated his voice, a low, steady anchor intended to pierce the man's panic. "You can't win this. Not here." "I'm already winning, Fed." Croft spat a fleck of spittle landing on Caroline's hair. She flinched, a sob catching in her throat. "You've got a choice. It's simple. Your gun or her life. Drop it now." Logan's training screamed at him to find the shot to end the threat. He saw the sliver of space between Croft's head and Caroline's, the millisecond openings that a marksman dreams of. But the subtle, unpredictable sway of the aircraft, the sheer panic radiating from Caroline that made her shudder uncontrollably. It was too much. The risk was unacceptable. He had to dismantle the situation, not shatter it. He had to engage the man, not the monster. "Okay, Croft. Okay," Logan said, his voice softening, conceding. He deliberately broke eye contact with Croft and looked at his own weapon as if contemplating the demand. It was a gesture of submission. "You win. Let's talk this through." He saw a flicker of triumph in Croft's eyes. It was working. He crouched slowly, every movement broadcasted non-threatening. He didn't drop the gun with a clatter that might spook Croft. He placed it carefully on the carpeted floor, the metal sinking into the plush fibers. Then, with the toe of his polished shoe, he slid it a few feet away into the middle of the aisle, a gesture of trust he didn't feel. "There," Logan said, standing up, his hands held open and away from his body. "No more gun." Croft grunted a sound of grim satisfaction. His grip on Caroline loosened fractionally. "See, not so tough without your hardware. Now here's what's going to happen. This plane is going to land. Nobody is going to approach it. No cops, no feds, nobody. I want a car, fueled and untraceable, waiting on the tarmac. No tricks or she dies before you can even get to your toy on the floor. You can't get away, Croft. Captain Miller's voice, steady and authoritative, cut through from the front of the aisle. The captain had positioned himself as a secondary point of contact, drawing some of the pressure. The airport is on lockdown. The second we touch down, it's over. Shut up, old man. Croft shrieked, his control fraying again. The brief moment of calm was evaporating. I'm talking to him. Only him. Logan held up a hand to the captain, a silent command to stand down. He needed to be Croft's only focus. He's right, Croft, Logan said immediately, siding with him to rebuild the rapport. The captain doesn't get at it. But I do. This is between you and me now. He took a half step forward. But your plan has a flaw. No flaws, yes. Logan insisted, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial man-to-man tone. That bag. He nodded his head toward the black rollerboard suitcase lying on the floor, a casualty of the earlier scuffle. That's your real prize, isn't it? Not her. You need that bag. It's your life, your ticket. And even you aren't skilled enough to carry a heavy suitcase and a hostage at the same time. You'll be clumsy. Slow. Croft's eyes, which had been locked on Logan, flickered to the bag. It was an involuntary tell, a confirmation more powerful than any word. Logan saw the greed war with the panic. The bag contained his escape, his fortune, his identity. Everything. So let's make a deal, Logan pressed, pushing his advantage. A trade. Give me the woman. Just let her go. She's useless to you now, just dead weight. You take the bag. I'll even help you clear a path to the door. You walk off this plane with your prize, and we'll deal with the consequences on the ground. One problem at a time. You get what you want. I get what I want. It was a perfect lie wrapped in a kernel of truth, a lifeline for a drowning man. How do I know you won't just grab your gun and shoot me the second I let her go? Croft snarled, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. He was considering it. Because my gun is on the floor, Logan said calmly, and because these people, he made a slow, sweeping gesture to the cabin full of terrified passengers, are now witnesses to our deal. I'm an FBI agent. I do things by the book. They all just heard me give my word. You let her go. You take the bag. That's the deal. The seconds stretched into an eternity. The hum of the engines was the only sound, a relentless reminder that they were falling toward a conclusion one way or another. Caroline, caught in the middle of this terrible negotiation for her life, felt a wave of nausea. She was a bargaining chip, her value being weighed against a suitcase. Croft made his decision. Fine. The word was a gunshot. With a sudden violent shove, he threw Caroline forward. She stumbled out of his grasp, her legs giving way, and fell to her knees in the aisle, gasping, great heaving lungs full of air. In the same fluid motion, Croft, free of his burden, dove for the suitcase. That was the moment, the pivot upon which the entire operation turned. Logan didn't go for his gun. That would have been too slow, too predictable. He launched himself forward like a sprinter from the blocks, his body low to the ground. He wasn't aiming for Croft. He was aiming for the suitcase. His shoulder, coiled with kinetic energy, slammed into the hard shell of the bag, just as Croft's fingers closed around the handle. The impact was explosive. Man and bag went sprawling in opposite directions. Croft cried out as he was thrown off balance, crashing into a row of seats. The suitcase flew through the air, hitting the floor with a sickening crack. The latches, never designed for such force, burst open. And then came the moment of sublime, tragic comedy. There were no diamonds, no stacks of cash, no bearer bonds or secret ledgers. What spilled out onto the aisle, scattering at the feet of the stunned passengers, was a collection of wrinkled shirts, a pair of worn socks, a dog-eared paperback novel, and a cheap souvenir snow globe from New York. It was laundry, just dirty laundry. Croft, pushing himself up, stared at the pathetic contents, his face a canvas of pure, uncomprehending shock. What? That single word was his undoing. The split second of cognitive dissonance was a lifetime in Logan Barrett's world. Logan was on him, a blur of controlled violence. He drove his knee into Croft's side, eliciting a sharp, breath-stealing cry of pain. Before Croft could recover, Logan had his arm twisting it behind his back in a textbook maneuver that forced him onto his stomach. The sharp metallic click-clack of handcuffs, snapping shut, echoed through the now utterly silent cabin. It was the sound of a world ending. Ben and the burly passenger from the earlier scuffle rushed forward to help secure Croft's legs. It was over. Logan stood up, his chest heaving, the adrenaline beginning its slow, shaky retreat. He looked over at Caroline. Sarah was helping her to her feet, her arm around her shoulder. Caroline's eyes were locked on the scattered clothes. "The bag," she whispered, her voice hoarse with disbelief. "It was empty." "Not empty," Logan corrected her, retrieving his weapon and holstering it with a decisive snap. He walked toward David Jensen, the co-pilot, who stood pale and defeated, held by another passenger. "It was bait, to get him to release you." He then ripped the tablet from Jensen's hands. His real assets were already digitized and transferred offshore the second he knew we were on the plane. The package you and Caroline were smuggling wasn't in the overhead bin. He held up the tablet for all to see. His real bag was this, a mobile, encrypted, untraceable bank vault. The package was never a physical object. It was access. Access you were supposed to help him with on this flight, and a clean getaway you were supposed to provide on the ground. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place, and the looks on Caroline and Jensen's faces were devastating to behold. They were not just criminals. They were fools. Dupes in a high-stakes game where they never even understood the currency, risking decades of their lives for a ghost. As the plane began its final heavy descent into Dallas-Fort Worth, a funereal silence settled over the cabin. The immediate terror was gone, replaced by a grim, shared exhaustion. Through the windows, the world outside reasserted itself first as a patchwork of green and brown, then as the sprawling grid of the city. Then as the plane banked for its final approach, they all saw it. Waiting near a secluded cargo terminal away from the civilian gates was a reception committee of flashing blue and red lights. A dozen dark SUVs were parked in a formidable, unbreachable line. It looked less like a runway and more like a military checkpoint. The bump of the tires on the tarmac was a jolt back to reality. There was no applause, no relieved chatter. As the plane taxied toward the waiting armada, the passengers watched, transfixed. The jet bridge, usually a symbol of arrival and freedom, connected with a heavy, ominous thud. The cabin door was opened not by a smiling gate agent, but by a stern-faced FBI agent in full tactical gear, his eyes sweeping the cabin. Alexander Croft, the ghost, was hauled off first, a string of curses trailing behind him. Then came David Jensen, head bowed the swagger of the cockpit, replaced by the shuffle of a man walking toward a cage. Finally, two agents, a man and a woman, made their way down the aisle to Caroline. She stood frozen by her jump seat, a statue of ruin. Her blonde hair was a mess, her uniform stained and wrinkled her face, a pale, tear-streaked wreck. She looked at Logan, her eyes a desperate, silent plea for a mercy she hadn't earned, and he couldn't give. Logan met her gaze for a long moment. He had saved her life, but he could not and would not save her from it. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod to the agents. It was all the confirmation they needed. Caroline Reed, the female agent, said, her voice professional, clinical, and devoid of all emotion. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to aid and abet a fugitive interference with a federal agent and actions leading to the endangerment of an aircraft." The words hung in the air, each one a nail in her coffin. As the cold steel of the handcuffs closed around her wrists, the full crushing weight of her karma finally landed. It wasn't just about losing a job she hated or a home she could barely afford. It was the loss of everything: her freedom, her name, her future. All of it traded away in a single ugly moment of prejudice at gate C-27. As the agents turned her to lead her away, she caught sight of the passengers. They stared at her, their faces a mixture of pity, contempt, and cold, hard judgment. She had sown the wind, and this was the whirlwind. Logan was the last to deplane, stepping out into the hot, humid Texas air. His boss, the Dallas field office special agent in charge, a grizzled veteran named Peterson, met him on the tarmac with a grim smile. "Hell of a way to come home, Logan," Peterson said, clapping him on the shoulder. "You have no idea," Logan replied, the weariness settling deep into his bones. He glanced back at the plane, now a sterile crime scene. His eyes drifted to where Caroline had been led away, a small, pathetic figure swallowed by the flashing lights. He felt no victory, no surge of pride, only a profound, hollow sense of waste. A life irrevocably shattered, a vast criminal enterprise, exposed all because of a single, pointless act of hate. The scales had been balanced, the check cashed. The drama was over, leaving behind only the wreckage. What you've just heard is a story about how the smallest act of prejudice can trigger an avalanche of devastating consequences. Caroline Reed didn't just have a bad day. Her choices, fueled by hate and greed, placed her at the epicenter of a federal investigation. She thought she was exercising power, but she was only lighting the fuse to her own life. The story of Flight 715 is a stark reminder that our actions, especially those born from prejudice, have repercussions we can't possibly foresee. Karma isn't a myth. It's the logical conclusion to the choices we make. What did you think of Caroline's ultimate fate? Was it justice? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you subscribe to our channel for more true life dramas that reveal the hidden truths of our world. Thank you for listening.